It's 2023. Debt levels are at record highs. What's the best way to start tackling debt? Ted is here to discuss it, starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Ted, today's topic, what is the best way to begin tackling debt? So we're starting the year off with that question.
Fair enough. And you don't want the obvious answer of don't have any in the first place.
Well, that is the obvious answer.
It's a little too late for that, right?
And unfortunately, if 2022 was any indication, inflation, record highs, expenses going up faster than income.
Yep.
What do you do to bridge the gap? Debt. So obviously, we're not saying it's right or wrong. It's just the way it is. So what do you do when you find yourself in that position where you got too much debt? So since this show is called Debt Free in 30, I thought, hey, why don't we talk about the practical ways to tackle it? So I guess the first question is to take a step back and say, okay, how did I get into this situation?
Right. How did this happen?
How did this happen? So what are the obvious reasons why people get into debt problems?
Well, I mean, the most obvious one is that you haven't got a sufficient income. And so that either means you're not earning enough, or perhaps you've lost your job, or for some reason, like the inflation we're experiencing these days, your costs have got out of line and your income can't change overnight.
And I think we've been saying this for years, and that is
since 1999.
Since
anybody's
1999.
Asking.
Yeah, so what are we in, like year 25 now of Hoyes Michaelis?
Hey, you got to speak louder. I can't hear you anymore.
We started when we were 6, so we're not as old as we look here. We're both 30. Our clients obviously have debt problems. That's why they're filing a consumer proposal or bankruptcy.
Right.
But more than that, what they really have is an income problem.
That's right. The underlying issue always has to be if you're spending money faster than you're making it, well, obviously you need to find a way to either make more money or reduce your spending. And I guess that would be the second reason. Your spending's out of control for some reason.
Yeah. And they're, and I think the perception, if you talk to someone on the street, is, oh, well, if someone's gone bankrupt, it's because they had a, huge spending problem, they're impulsive, they've got a gambling problem, all those sorts of things.
Basically, they're blaming the person who's gotten into bankruptcy.
Right. And, certainly there are people who fit that bill exactly, but that would be the distinct minority, I think, of the people that we deal with.
Yeah, there's lots of room to share the blame. I put the blame more on the fact that you can get 27 credit cards if you apply for them. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, there's somebody else at fault here, not just you for applying for them.
Yeah, and we did a show back in December about credit cards and, all the new ways you can now pay with installments and all the new ways to do it. So it's certainly an issue. Okay, so we understand how it's possible to get into debt, and that's why we have record levels of debt today.
Right.
During the pandemic, we managed to delever a bit, but we're back over where we were when we started prior to 2020. So client comes in to see you, and this happens like 10 times a day for you and me. What are the questions that you start with when you're talking to someone who has debt? What are the, rhyme them off? What's the thought process there?
Okay. Well, so after the generalities, which is, what caused you to call me now? What's changed recently? When we start digging into the debt itself, it's, do you actually know who you owe? Could you make me a list of who it is and how long you've had that debt, how much you're supposed to be paying for it, what the interest rate is on it? Most people can't do that.
Yeah, and how much you're paying, they have a vague idea that, okay, this one's $200 a month, this one's $400 a month. But when you actually put the interest rate beside it and add it up to see how long it's going to take, that's when it becomes a pretty scary thing.
That's right. Well, and that's the reason most people don't actually know that information when they come see us, because it's gotten to the point where they're afraid to look.
And to blame the lenders here, they don't make it easy to fully understand what the big picture is.
Sure.
We've had that discussion about car loans. Well, it's not $500 a month, it's $125 a week.
That's right.
And so it sounds like a small number, and it's 8 years, and so you don't really fully grasp. So okay, so step number 1, get a piece of paper, a spreadsheet, an app on your phone, whatever you want to do. Here's everybody I owe money to, here's how much it is, here's what the interest rate is, and here's what the minimum payment is. How long is it going to take me to pay it off? It becomes really obvious then.
And just as a reminder, folks, if you've already started to get behind on stuff, you might actually have to put things like your utilities on this list. So if you're not paying off the balance every month for your hydro, for your gas, for whatever, then that's a debt that you owe as well. And those have got to be priorities, because if you stop paying those things, you're going to turn off the services.
Yep, and particularly in the winter, heat is a thing we like here in Canada.
Yeah.
So we got the debt side of it, and then I guess you've already addressed this a bit, and that's the income side of it. So
Right.
what are you looking for there?
So what forms of income do you have? How stable is it? How often does it come in? So are you paid weekly? Are you paid biweekly? Are you paid semi-monthly? Are you on government money, which means you get it the third last day of the month? What's the flow for your cash coming in? Because we're going to need to know that for the cash going out.
And the sporadic nature of it, or the variable nature of it, is a big issue for
That's
a lot
right.
of people.
I mean, think of the, right now, say real estate agents. One, the market's down in the winter anyway, but the market's been hit pretty hard in the last 6 months because of interest rates. And so these folks don't know when their next paycheck is coming in. So it makes it a little more challenging for them. It makes it a lot more challenging for them.
And that's certainly true for people who work in construction, who maybe get a lot less income in the winter than they get in the summer. There's a lot of jobs that are seasonal. There's lots of people, if you're a flight attendant for Air Canada, you get a check that's always the same number on the first of the month. And then on the 15th of the month, your check is based on your hours and adjustments and per diems and all the rest of it. So
crazy.
Really hard to budget when I don't exactly know what exactly my paycheck is going to be. So, okay, so we've got the debt side of it, the income side of it. And then the obvious question then is, okay, so of that income, how much is going towards debt?
Right. How much have you been paying towards it? And make a note here, folks. If you're talking to us, you probably haven't been paying enough towards it. One of the issues is that you can't make all of those minimum payments anymore. So what we're trying to do is make you become aware of the fact that there's something wrong going on here.
Yeah, and the reason might be, well, I got to pay rent, I got to pay groceries.
Yep.
That's it. I got nothing left over. What am I supposed to do?
Yep.
So you have to zero in on what does it cost you to live, ignoring what the debt payments are.
Right. Well, and that's your next one. You've got to have some kind of expectation of what it does cost you to live. And lots of people don't do that anymore. It's another one of those head in the sand kind of things.
Because it's not a comfortable reality to look at.
Right.
So, okay, so I do this analysis and I go, my paycheck is this much, and I'm going to estimate what it is in a typical month. Maybe I'll just estimate what it's going to be next month. Let's not try to go too far in the future.
Yeah, or you could take the last 2 months and say, okay, so this is the average, and try and use that if it's realistic.
And maybe what you should be doing is looking at it biweekly if you get paid biweekly or whatever makes sense. So here's how much I got to pay just to live.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how much I've got to pay towards the minimum payments on my debt. Now what? I guess I'm looking at, are there places I can cut back? Is there places I can increase my income? Is there any way to balance my budget?
And that's the challenge, right? Is there some way to increase your income? And for most people, there isn't an easy way to do that. All right. Well, so how do I cut back on my expenses? And at some point, you'll have cut back as much as you can cut back.
And so we'll talk about that, what we do in that eventuality. Let's talk about then the situation where, okay, I've done all this budgeting. Maybe I've been able to cut back some of my expenses. Maybe I've been able to pick up some extra hours at work. I've now got, let's make a number, $500 a month that I can devote to paying off debt.
Okay.
There are many different theories, some of which I think are stupid, but okay, we're going to talk about them. There are many different theories about what I should be doing with this money. So, I mean, you're a big financial guru type person. You're always talking about the snowball method and the avalanche method.
Of course I am. Every morning I give my kids those lectures.
Exactly. So, okay, the one method is I take all of my debts and I make the minimum payment on all of them.
Right.
I guess you have to do that or else they're going to be
problems.
But let's say I can make all the minimum payments and I've got an extra dollar I can put towards one of them.
Yep.
How do I choose which one I put it towards?
Well, so it's you need to know a little bit about yourself here. So one option is figure out which of the debts is the most expensive. So it's got the highest interest rate. It's the one that's costing you the most every month, and put the extra money towards that because it causes you to save the most money. So that's a pretty pragmatic way to look at things, but it's not very satisfying. So another approach would be, well, what's the smallest debt? What's the easiest one to get rid of? I'll put the money towards that. And the reason for doing that is you get a reward. Oh, I paid off one of my debts, and now you move on to the next one. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's all psychology.
Well, there is a right answer, but
he's going to give you the right answer.
In my
now.
world, there is. But no, you're right. So the snowball method is what you just described. Okay, I want to, if I can get rid of that little debt, then now I can put more money on the bigger debts. And I do see the logic of it. in that if I've got 6 different debts and they all have a minimum payment due on 6 different days of the month,
Right.
and so I only get paid 2 days of the month, so now I'm juggling and figuring out. So I've got that cell phone bill for that thing I canceled 6 months ago, and it's $200. Okay, if I could just get rid of that $200,
Right.
rather than allocating, I'm going to give them $4 every month, and it's going to take 50 months to pay it. It would be easier just, blow it away
Make
and
it
get
go
rid of
away.
it.
Yep.
So, and you're right, psychologically great. I've paid off a debt. I used to have 6, now I've got 5. So I definitely feel better. So I agree with that method if the debt is relatively small.
Right.
If it's something, okay, $100, let's just get rid of it.
If you're going to be 50 months paying it off, that method doesn't make any sense.
Right. I of course, am an accountant, as are you. And I look at the numbers.
Right.
And I go, well, if I've got this finance company loan where I'm paying 44% interest, or even worse, your favorite,
Yes, the payday lenders at 360% interest.
then that would probably be the one to be whacking away at rather than my credit card, which only charges me 20% interest. So if someone has a payday loan, would it be your advice that that's the one you're definitely trying to attack first?
Right.
Because it's probably a smaller number than what you owe on your line of credit or your credit card.
Yep.
And
And they're evil.
they're evil. Well, they certainly charge a lot of interest.
They certainly do. Well, I mean, basically the whole system is you borrow from them, you make the payment, and then you got to borrow again because you're broke. So
And that's where the psychology of it comes in, I guess. So you started this by saying, how did you get into this situation to begin with?
Right.
Paying off a payday loan and then getting another payday loan is probably not going to be the big picture solution here.
the treadmill analogy comes to mind, right?
Yeah, you just keep on going and going and going. So my own personal opinion is the math would indicate that attack the highest interest rate ones first. So if I have an extra $50 this month, throw it on whatever my highest interest rate one is. Now that assumes that you can.
Right.
I don't know if you have a finance company loan, can you make an extra payment? I don't know if their rules allow that, how it works.
In Ontario, you certainly can.
So, and if it's a car loan, well, a car loan is a fixed payment. You probably can't just phone them up and say, hey, I'd like to make an extra half payment this month.
But the car is going to be at a better interest rate than any of your credit cards.
Right. So it's likely not the one you're going to be attempting to pay off first. So, okay. So your advice then is delve into your brain and figure out what kind of person are you. Are you, like me, motivated by I want to save the maximum amount of money?
Yep.
And even if it means I'm going to have this small debt and it's going to take me a year to pay it off when I could have paid it off in one fell swoop, I still prefer to save the maximum amount of money? Or am I the kind of person who says, look, I want to make my life simple, get rid of the little ones so that I can focus on the big ones? And part of that may be, I was talking to a guy last week who is working tons of overtime now just because of the industry he's in. He's able to do it. It's available. And I said, well, that's going to kill you doing 7 days a week. And he says, well, yeah, I'm not going to do it forever, but I'm a single guy. My kids are growing. It's the winter. I'm an outdoorsy guy. I like to be outdoors in the summer. So you know what? I'm willing to work all the hours I can now.
Pound away at the debt.
Pound away at it, and maybe even have a couple of bucks in the bank at the end of it. So for him, that makes sense. Now, if you've got a spouse and 3 kids and a dog and 2 cats,
right?
Do I have the math right there, Ted? Is it 3 dogs? So
3 dogs, 3 cats.
3 dogs, 3.
No
There
cats.
you go. So it's like, you know what? I can't be doing that much, so I'm going to focus on the other thing. So, okay, now the other idea that occurs to people is, well, what I will do then if these high interest rate debts are my problem is I'll get a consolidation loan.
If you qualify.
So what do you mean by if you qualify?
So first, a consolidation loan is where you go to a bank or finance company and you get a loan or a line of credit sufficient to pay off all of your other debts. And so conceptually, this is a great idea because you get a lower interest rate. You only have one payment to worry about. Makes things great. The problem is most of the commercial lenders now, and I'm talking about the big banks, won't give you a consolidation loan to deal with other companies' debts. So if you've got 2 or 3 credit cards with the bank you deal with and then 2 or 3 more with other people, they'll happily consolidate all of their debt for you, but they're not likely to, again, give enough money to consolidate all the other debts as well.
Because they don't want to take on someone else's problem.
Right. They're then assuming risk.
So when I go to the bank and I say I'd like to apply for a loan, they punch it into the computer because, of course, there's no human beings that do anything anymore.
Right.
What is the computer looking at then? Is it purely just what's my credit score, or is it something else?
So they're looking at your debt service ratio. They're looking at the history of your debts. And of course, they're looking at your credit report to some extent.
So what is your debt service ratio?
So the debt service ratio is the portion of your income that's involved in making payments on all of your debts.
So if I make $2,000 a month and my debt payments are $500 a month, that's a 25% debt service ratio.
Correct.
And the banks will say, okay, we're willing to go up to this number, but no higher.
That's right. And it depends on the nature of the debts too, right? Mortgage debt is treated different for your debt service ratio than credit card debts.
And every lender has a different policy, a different strategy.
Yep.
I was speaking to a company who I will not name, but they are in the retail business, and they offer retail credit to their clients. These are, bigger items that people would buy. And I asked them, well, how do you make your credit decision? And they said, it's entirely based on credit score.
Right.
So we don't really go into in-depth analysis of what your income is and all that. It's if your credit score is good, then you get the loan. Okay. That may or may not be a good strategy for you, but
I'm wondering which credit score where, but
well, whoever they're subscribing to, I guess.
Right.
So whether it's accurate or not, who knows? So the consolidation loan, great idea, because if the bank will lend me at 10% and I'm paying 44% on my finance company loan, no brainer.
Makes sense. Yep.
But the problem is I probably don't qualify.
Right. Well, particularly if you're already into that 44% loan, that in and of itself probably means you don't qualify, because they're going to say, well, you didn't qualify for a regular bank loan. You went to these high interest lenders. Obviously, there's something wrong. Even if we can't figure out what it is, that disqualifies you right off the bat.
Unless your situation has changed considerably. I'm now working at a bigger job. I've paid off my other debts. I've got a co-signer, something like that. Now, are you a big fan of co-signers?
Yeah, the risk with co-signers, folks, is that's where, just so you understand, co-signer is somebody that guarantees a debt. So you go in, you sign for a loan, and they say, well, we want somebody to guarantee that if you can't pay, and they will. So that's a co-signer. Most people use family members, or sometimes it's close friends. The problem is if you're having financial difficulty, and for some reason you start defaulting, that means the co-signer is now on the hook. And that can destroy whatever relationship you have. It also means they're really approving the co-signer and not you. So they're giving you credit that you didn't qualify for. And so that should be a warning sign right off the bat that maybe you're applying for too much credit.
Yeah, and I can understand if, your kid graduates from school and moves out of the house and is getting an apartment and doesn't have any credit, and you say, okay, fine, I'll co-sign with the landlord because that's what parents do. And the most I'm ever going to be on the hook for is, I don't know, a month or two's rent before they kick you out for not paying your rent.
Right.
Maybe 5 or 6 months or something. But okay, it's understandable. It's your kid. They've got a job, whatever. But when you're co-signing for a finance company loan or a car loan or a mortgage, then you're taking on a massive amount of risk. So the problem with consolidation loans is you may not qualify. Right. If you do qualify, you may need a co-signer, and as a result, you're now potentially bringing other people into it. So if I do qualify for a debt consolidation loan, is that a good way to tackle debt, or is that the kind of thing that is likely to fail long-term anyways?
Well, so here's the most common mistake people make when they consolidate their debts. They don't actually destroy all the underlying credit cards or other vehicles they had for obtaining credit. So let's say you had 4 credit cards. They totaled out to $30,000. You got a line of credit from the bank, paid off those credit cards. The thing to do is to keep one credit card with like a $1,000 limit. And what people fail to do is they keep the 4 credit cards, and then whatever the reason was they ran up the debt in the first place, they probably haven't addressed it. Like the loan dealt with the debt, but it didn't deal with the underlying problem. And so now they just run up the 30,000 credit cards again. So a year, 18 months from now, instead of owing 30 grand on 4 credit cards, they owe 60 grand, 30 on a line of credit and 30 grand on 4 credit cards.
Yeah. And if the reason that they are using their credit cards is that, back to point number 1, my income is lower than what my expenses are,
right,
then the consolidation loan is only kicking the can down the road. It's not solving the underlying problem. So I think in all of these discussions we're having, you got to get back to the first point, which is what has gotten you into debt in the first place, and can you address that? Because otherwise you're just digging yourself deeper and deeper. I mean, if you have debt because, well, I bought a house, okay, well, that's what a mortgage is. So I don't think that's kind of understandable. If I got a car loan because I need a car to get to work, okay, well, that's not a recurring thing that I'm going to need to do every week, hopefully. But if I got into debt because I can't cover my living expenses, then ultimately you got to find a way to address that.
Well, and the worst type of debt, in my opinion, I mean, putting this payday loan thing aside, is if you're incurring more debt because you can't make the minimum payments on your existing debt, then you really got a problem, because now it's debt to pay off debt. Like, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
That's what the government does.
Yeah, let's not. Okay, we're gonna do a whole series on the government and my opinion of their financial skills.
And they're telling us how to do it, so it's all good. So, okay, well let's go into some practical advice here then. So I think we've sketched out how do you tackle debt. You start by figuring out who you owe and make sure you understand it. You come up with you do whatever you can from a cash flow point of view to free up whatever cash you can, and then you decide for yourself how you want to attack it. Am I going to pay the little guy first, the higher interest rate one first, the guy who's secured, maybe I want to get him paid off. That's probably a lower interest rate. Is it the guy who's calling and yelling and screaming at me the most?
Yep.
Often the squeaky wheel gets the oil. What other types of advice would you give someone when they're thinking through this whole process?
So part of all of this is predicated on the fact that you've recognized that you got a problem, but you're probably not an expert in dealing with debt. I mean, you've got debt and you've had it forever, but it's not what you do for a living, is sorting this sort of thing out. So if you're comfortable with this, you've recognized you got a problem, you should probably seek advice someplace. The most obvious, in our opinion, is to contact somebody like you or I. And half the people that call us, they just need to be pointed in the right direction. They're okay. The other half need to look at a solution that's beyond just budgeting.
And what types of solutions would those be then?
Yeah. So we're talking about a consumer proposal where you offer to repay a portion of what you owe, or in some cases, bankruptcy is actually the right answer.
Other than us, and obviously we're biased, we think if you've got a debt problem, you should go to a licensed insolvency trustee, because we are the only people regulated by the federal government to deal with debt. But I understand we are biased in this area. Who else can you go and talk to about this? Is a financial planner a good resource, a mortgage broker or a banker? Like, what about these other financial professionals?
So you can talk to any of these financial professionals as long as you recognize what their bias is. So in Canada, we've got, was it chartered or certified financial planner designation?
CFPs, yep.
But those folks, that designation is to sell you investment products. It's not to work out your monthly budget. Now, if you're talking to somebody in a bank, well, their chief concern is how do they cover the bank's assets? How do they look after what you owe the bank as opposed to what you owe everybody else? If you're talking to, well, any other sort of financial advisor, it could be your insurance agent or something, look to what their interest in this is.
Yeah, and the caveat I will put on that, a CFP, they've actually got to take some courses and do some stuff. It's not a trivial thing.
Right.
Anybody can say, I'm a financial advisor. I'm
or a credit counselor.
Planner, or a credit. Yeah. I mean, these are words that are not governed by the law. Licensed insolvency trustee, well, there's laws that govern that.
Right.
You know, medical doctor. You can't put MD after your name unless you've gone through a certain
manic depressant.
That would be another thing, I think. But so with a certified financial planner, there are, certainly a lot of good ones, and a lot of them, some of them are fee-only planners.
Right.
So what's their incentive? Well, it's their incentive to charge you a fee to give you advice. They don't care if you buy that stock or this stock, if you invest in real estate or whatever. So I think that's critically important. What is the person's incentive here? If you walk into a bank and they put you in touch with their financial advisor, what they are most likely doing is selling you a mutual fund.
Selling you something.
Sponsored by the bank.
Yep.
I don't know if you can go to Bank ABC and get a mutual fund from Bank DEF.
That would be interesting.
Obviously, if you're doing it through their discount brokerage arm, I guess you can. But they are making a commission on what you're doing. So I have no problem with financial planners. A lot of our clients can't afford them because they're living paycheck to paycheck.
A financial planner's focus is on how to invest for the future as opposed to get you out of a debt problem. So it's not what they're focused on because they can't make a living at it.
Yeah, you're right. And so, which is why there's a lot of financial planners who will say, you know what, you got to talk to Doug or Ted. Right. Here you go, talk to them. And once we get the debt under control, we're more than happy to send you back to that financial planner who can then be doing the budgeting. And they are great at things like, do you have enough insurance? Do you, is your debt optimized correctly?
Nobody really understands any of their personal finances. Everybody knows their little piece of it. Unless you are some sort of financial professional like us with our multiple designations, most of this stuff is just Greek. And so you do need somebody that can show you the way.
Aren't you Greek?
I am Greek.
So there you go. So
and Sicilian.
It was
so don't get me mad at you.
That's right. It was the Sicilian Greeks. I'm going to have to look at the map and see. I didn't know Sicily was even in Greek. It's not. Okay, there you go. So, so again, to wrap this up then, figure out who you owe money to, figure out whether you can free up some cash, and then come up with a strategy. The strategy may be throw it at the high interest rate ones, throw it at the small ones. The strategy may be I'm going to make a payment every time I get paid.
Well, and the strategy may be that you've got to call somebody to get some help.
And then if all of these internal things don't work, then seek some advice. So when you call us, you've already sketched out the questions we're going to ask.
Yep.
Who do you owe money to? What's your income? What are your expenses? What assets do you own? That sort of thing. And then we will give you the different options that would apply in your case.
Right.
And so if the answer is, you got lots of equity in your house, then we're going to put you in touch with a mortgage professional to perhaps refinance your house, maybe a real estate person to get an appraisal. Maybe you need to sell your house.
And you used to be able to do that. In 2023, I'm not so sure that's going to work anymore, but that's a different show.
Yeah, you will get, you're going to get less for your house today than you would have got a year ago. That's certainly for sure.
Right.
But we're going to walk you through all those different options. And the person may say, you know what? The kids are grown. I wanted to sell the house anyways. Now's the time to do it.
Yep.
Other people will say, I've got 3 dogs, 3 cats, 3 kids, and I can't just go rent a 1-bedroom apartment somewhere.
Right.
Okay, then we have to look at the other options. And of course, the one we continue to come back to, and we will talk about all these options with you. We'll talk about debt consolidation, and if you want to talk snowball and avalanche method, we'll do that too.
Not only are we legally required to, it's the right answer. Because if we give you the right answer to solve your problem, when somebody tells you they're in trouble, they'll say, well, you should call Doug and Ted. Yeah.
When I go to a doctor, I want the doctor to say, well, you could do physio, you could have surgery, you could take this medication, give me the options. What's the pros and cons? Right. And then we can help work it out. And that's why a significant number of the people who end up contacting us end up doing a consumer proposal, which looks like a debt consolidation because you're making a payment every month, but it isn't because you're paying less than the full amount owing.
Yeah, and there's no interest on the debt.
And obviously it's something the people you owe money to have to agree to.
Right.
And so we will help you figure out what do we offer that's good enough that they will say yes, but that you can still afford. And for people who can't do it on their own, that is the ultimate solution for tackling debt.
Correct.
So there you go. Okay, so for 2023, I suspect that we will be this show is called Debt Free in 30, so I'm pretty sure we'll be talking about debt pretty much every week. But I think we are going to have more and more clients who have more and more debt.
Right.
And we talked about it on our year-end prediction show, what we see coming for 2023. So don't sit there waiting for it to get better on its own.
Yeah.
Because interest always goes against you if you have debt.
Money problems don't just go away. You actually have to deal with them.
And there are options. How much does it cost when someone calls you?
It costs nothing to talk to us.
See, that's not a good business model.
It isn't. That's why, if you think back a couple of months, we were trying to get sponsors.
Yeah,
that didn't work either.
What's happening? I've had 0 banks
call us to be sponsored.
No payday loan companies, no finance. Nobody calls us.
I was hoping for a jacket or maybe a toque.
I know. Well, you do have the Hoyes Michaelis on the camera can't
somewhere.
see it. It's on the sleeve. So yeah, I mean, by law, we are not allowed to charge an upfront fee.
Right.
It's the law. We cannot start collecting money until you've actually filed your proposal.
And folks, that's actually a pretty good test. If when you talk to somebody who's saying they can help you with their debts, if the first thing they ask for is money, you probably don't want to be talking to that person.
Yeah. Until you have a file number showing that the file has been registered with the federal government, we are not allowed to start collecting money until the process is started. So, and I've had lots of people, I'm sure you have too, over the last 2 or 3 years who contacted us before the pandemic started.
Yep.
Their situation was in a state of flux. And now here we are 3 years later when they are finally in a position to file. That's when we start the procedure. That's when they start paying.
Correct.
So if you're paying in advance, then there's something.
I just added 5 minutes with that little comment.
That's fantastic.
We were closing
that's
the show
fantastic. So, hey, look, we're right at 30 minutes, so that's good. Ted, thank you very much. Welcome to 2023. That was our show for today. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Click all the links, the buttons, the whatevers. And a new show comes out on the audio version as well on all podcasting apps. That is our show for today. Until next week, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.